don't think this is gonna work. Okay, this is much better. I have all my books in neat little piles and I have a lot to talk about. I put a tank top on just for the spirit of this video, but it's too cold. Much better. Even if it's 90 degrees outside, you will find me in a pullover indoors at all times. Hi, I'm Maddie and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about my summer book recommendations and then my gigantic summer TBR. I've seen a lot of booktubers doing this recently and I thought it would be fun. I definitely need to create like a summer TBR and try to stick to it so that I don't buy more books. So that's what we're gonna do. First, I guess I should kind of go over my idea of a summer read and explain why I picked the books that I did for my recommendation list. When I think of a summer read, I think of like a lot of romance. Anything at the beach is an obvious choice, but I really think of shorter books because I don't know what it is, but summer does not seem like the time for me to pick up a big, long book, especially like a big fantasy book that's like hard to get into and a lot of world building maybe. It just really feels like that is more reserved for fall. There's just something about the idea of sitting down at the pool or at the beach and picking up just a quick, short little book that you get sucked into really quick that feels very summer to me. So for my recommendations, my biggest categories are definitely romance and then thrillers. I'll start with the thrillers because the first one I actually finished this morning and I loved it. And it's The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This one isn't a thriller actually, it's more of just a mystery. Like it doesn't have that scary, suspenseful thriller aspect of it, but it was a very good mystery. My roommate Kat actually read this and she has been begging me to read it so that we can start the TV show that just came out, I think on Apple TV. And so I read it in about 2 days and I'm very excited for us to watch the show now. This was really good and it got me out of a bit of a reading slump. I think it's the perfect book for that. I just finished reading 2 books back to back that I really did not enjoy. Each one took me like 10 days to finish, and so I really just needed something quick to get me back into a good reading like mood, and this was definitely it. This is about our main character Hannah, who is married to Owen, and he has a daughter from a previous marriage, Bailey. And Bailey's like 16 years old, doesn't really love Hannah, like they don't necessarily get along. And one day Owen just disappears. He doesn't come home, but he leaves a note for Hannah that says protect her. And he's talking about his daughter Bailey. And so Hannah and Bailey are just like obviously scared and confused, don't know where he is. And they spend the whole book trying to find out about him and where he is. Meanwhile, the police and people are like questioning them. And it was just a really quick read. It's not very long and has pretty short chapters, lots of little mini cliffhangers throughout. And so it's just one of those quick books that you could read in one sitting and you just don't really want to put down. So this would be really great, I think, for like a long day at the beach or at the pool. Okay, next thriller mystery is The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. This is again a really short, like 300-page book, and this is about a man who meets a woman at an airport and convinces her to come home with him and help him kill his wife. So this one isn't like the best thriller in the world, but it was another quick read and it's a different story. I thought it was pretty interesting and there were a few plot twists in it that I was just not expecting. This one is a cozy mystery, which I know that sounds like fall, winter type thing, but I think cozy mystery really just means it's not like scary. Even though there is death in these books, it's not like super intense. It's more of like a warm feeling mystery. It's a little bit more about like family and stuff, so that's kind of the vibe. And that's why I included it, because maybe some people don't want to have a scary thriller mystery type book for the summer. Maybe you want more of like happy vibes but still a little bit of mystery. So I think this would work well. And this is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. This is the first in a series called the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery. I actually have the second one. Where did I put it? Found it. I read this at the beginning of the month, so it was on my little cart. But the first one's Arsenic and Adobo, and then Homicide and Hollow Hollow. I think there's 2 more after this. This series is about Leela, who moves back to her childhood home to help her aunt, who has a restaurant that is not doing so well. And in the first book, she's working as a waitress at the restaurant, and her ex-boyfriend, who's also a food critic, comes in and he's being really rude, and he starts eating and he just dies like mid-plate. So the police think that her family did it, and so she has to go and prove their innocence herself. So even though people do die in these movies, in these books, I think all of them have at least like one person die, and then she's kind of solving the mystery of it. They don't feel super heavy, and they definitely aren't scary or anything like that. So they're just more of like a cozy mystery vibe. I think that name describes it pretty well. These are not the best books I've ever read. I think they're both like a 3-star book for me. So don't go into it with like the highest expectations, but they're definitely just a cute little read that I like to throw in between maybe some heavier stuff or some fantasies that take a bit more brain power. And the main character and her family are Filipino, so they talk a lot about Filipino culture and a lot about food. And for that reason, I could see these being slightly boring for people. If you need like a plot-heavy, action-packed kind of book, then this wouldn't be for you. You have a lot of just, you know, interactions with her and her family and her friends. And so they're a little bit slower for a mystery, but I personally enjoy them, and they're just like kind of a fluffy book that I like to throw in between other reads. Moving on to romance. This is my biggest pile. Like I said, apparently overheating is something that my camera likes to do now, even when I'm indoors. So I was forced to take a quick little snack break. I don't remember what I was saying before, but I'm pretty sure I was going to show you my romance recs, which pretty much all of these are popular Book Talk, BookTube books. And because of that, I'll go pretty quick because you've probably heard of them before. So first is The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. This is the first in a little trilogy. Again, super short reads. This is young adult. It's about Belly, who is like early teens, I think, and these 2 boys who, her family and their family, they always spend summers together at Cousins Beach. And this is like kind of a coming of age romance story. It's like the first summer where she's a little bit more grown up and she actually feels pretty and like everybody else starts to notice her, that sort of thing. The chapters are super short, so this is really quick to get through. I've only read the first one because it was the only one I had at the time I read it. But if I had all 3, I probably would have just knocked them out back to back because I think it took me a day to read this, and I'm a pretty slow reader, but this anybody I think could get through in a day, and it's just a really cute, happy read. The rest of these romances don't necessarily take place over the summer. They're just romance books that I like that aren't super long and I think would be fun to read over the summer. So first I have Allie Hazelwood's The Love Hypothesis and Love on the Brain. These are both about women in STEM. One of them, Love Hypothesis, is about Olive and Adam. Olive is a PhD student. He is, I think, a professor, and they are fake dating. I feel like everybody has read this book already, but I was pretty late to the game when I read it. So if you haven't, I would say this is definitely worth the read. This was my first romance book that I read, so it's really good as like an introduction into adult romance. Like I said, you've probably heard of this book and heard a million things about it, but I do personally think that it's worth the hype. And Love on the Brain, I will say, is definitely not as good. It's about Bea and Levi. They both go and work for NASA, and I think when they were in school together, they were kind of like, not arch nemesis, but they just didn't really get along. She has always thought he hated her, and so it's a workplace romance. And like I said, it's not as good as The Love Hypothesis, in my opinion, but if you're into this sort of thing and you like the women in STEM, then I think that it's still worth a read. Next up, I have the Twisted series. So far, I've only read Twisted Love and Twisted Games. These are the first 2. And this is an interconnected standalone series. Again, it's super popular, so I'm sure you've already heard of it if you're on like the BookTube book talk space. But this is about a group of 4 girlfriends and each one has their own book. These can be a little bit cheesy at times, but I like them. I like Anna Huang's writing and I'm excited to read the next 2. I've heard that everyone loves Twisted Games the most, and I agree that out of these 2, I did like it the best. They are a little bit spicy and they're just fun. Okay, my last romance recommendations are ones that I feel like are not talked about enough on the internet, and that is Mr. Wrong Number and The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. These are her first 2 new adult novels. I think that means like kind of a bridge between young adult and adult, like 20-year-olds. And I loved these books, specifically Mr. Wrong Number, favorite romance I've ever read. I did read The Do-Over, which is one of her young adult books, and I thought it was cute, but I didn't love it. It felt super young to me. So if you felt kind of the same way about any of her young adult books, I think you would like these. I thought these were great. The banter between the 2 main characters is so good, and I like all the characters in them. Mr. Wrong Number is about Colin and Olivia, and Olivia is like one of those girls that everything goes wrong for her and she ends up losing her apartment. So she has to move in with her older brother, who is roommates with Colin. And one day she gets this text from a random number and they never figure out who they are, but they just start texting and kind of flirting. And surprise, surprise, it's Colin that she's texting, which it's not a spoiler, it's on the back of the book. And you're supposed to pretty much know the whole time, but they don't know. This was really good. I loved this. It took me like 2 settings to read this book and I was just like smiling and laughing the whole time. So I recommend this book to everyone. I also love and recommend The Love Wager. You don't have to read Mr. Wrong Number first. They're another interconnected standalone series, so there's just a little bit of character overlap. You get Olivia and Colin in this one, just a tiny bit, but you don't have to read them together. This is about Hallie and Jack. They meet at a wedding one night, they had this fun night together, and then they decide to just be friends. And they come up with this love wager to push each other to go on dates. They're trying to find a significant other for each other, and the whole time they are just friends, but they're kind of enjoying hanging out with each other more than all of their dates. And this had very much the same vibes as Mr. Wrong Number. It was another super cute, just fun read. The last category is just general fiction. I have 3. So the first is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. And this I know was really popular like a few years ago, but I feel like I never hear anybody talk about it anymore. And I love this book. This is about a mother-daughter who are always moving around because the mom's an artist, and to get inspiration, I think she just moves them like every year or so. And they move into this suburban town, and it basically just follows them when they move into this new community, and they're just not really like everybody else. Like I said, the mom's an artist and she's not like the most successful artist. They don't have a ton of money, but in this rich suburban neighborhood, everybody is like super polished. They really care about their appearances, and it's just about how they try to kind of fit in. And there's a family that they kind of get like entangled with. This does deal with some heavier topics, and I remember there's definitely some sad moments in this, so if that's not what you're looking for, then I wouldn't recommend it. But I think this is a really great book. It's very short, like everything else that I have here, but it has a really great story, and I think it's just definitely something everybody should read. Next, I have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And if you don't know what this is about, it's about Daisy Jones, who's a singer that's like up and coming, who gets paired with this band, The Six, and they become like one of the most popular bands in the world. And it's just about their journey in, I think, the 70s as they like rise to stardom. I don't know if it takes place in the summer, but it's them on tour a lot of the times, and so they're just like moving about, traveling, and I don't know, it feels summery to me. This is written in interview style, which I thought was pretty interesting, and I thought that it was maybe going to be boring because of that, but I definitely didn't think so. My last recommendation is one of my new favorite books, and it is Malibu Rising, again by Taylor Jenkins Reid. These are the only 2 books I've read from her, so I definitely need to read more. But this is not one of her more popular books, but I liked it better than Daisy Jones and the Six. And it's definitely very summery. It's about a family in Malibu and a lot of them surf, so I think this is perfect for the summer months. This is about the Riva family, and it's a split timeline between the parents from like 30, 40 years ago when they first started having their kids, and then in the 80s, the kids now, the parents aren't really in their lives, and you see them just kind of living as a family, just the 4 of them. And the whole story kind of builds up to this party that's happening in the present, with the 80s. And it's this big party that the oldest sister throws with all these rich and famous people, and usually it's like a big thing, a lot of stuff happens. But this time, all these secrets from like the family and random people at the party start coming out, and so it's definitely a book that had me stressed the whole time. I just thought this was super interesting. You get to hear so many different point of views, like different people at the party who aren't main characters whatsoever, but you get to hear just like a snippet of their lives and what's going on. And then obviously there's the main 4 children, and each one of them has like a lot going on. But I loved this. It's definitely one of my favorite reads of this year so far. My camera decided we are no longer friends. First she overheats and then the battery dies. So let's see if I can finish this video with one more go. We left off with my last recommendation, so now I have my own summer TBR left. And this time I want to start with my fantasy pile. Technically it's a fantasy, sci-fi, and Greek mythology pile. So first, I would like to finally finish the Percy Jackson series. I started this a few months ago. I never read it when I was a kid, and my friends begged me to read it when I first got back into reading, and I read the first 3, and I read them back to back and just got like a little bit bored of them, so I have the last 2 left. These actually feel summery to me. I think it's just because they're so young. These are technically, I think, middle grade. So they're kids' books, they are Greek mythology, and they just kind of feel like fun summery books to me. They're also obviously short and shouldn't take me too long to get through, so I hope to finally finish the series in the next couple months. And I have one more Greek mythology that seems like it could be good for summer. It's Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This I've had on my bookshelf for a while now. I just bought it on a whim, and I don't know if people love it or not, but I had seen it before and I just picked it up. Like I said, I really don't know what this is about, and I'm not very familiar with Greek mythology, so whatever it is going to be new to me anyways, but it's about the Princess of Crete, and honestly I think it's just the sun that made me think, throw it in the TBR pile. So we'll see if I actually get to this. I've had it for a really long time and haven't picked it up, so I'm putting it in the pile to kind of force myself to maybe consider it. Next is a book I doubt I'm going to read, but again, I'm putting it on my TBR to see if I can finally get it off my TBR, but if I don't read it, I won't be too upset, and it's Dune. I bought this years ago before I started reading again, and I tried to pick it up a few different times, but I only ever got like 60 pages in before I was totally bored. And this is pretty long. It doesn't really interest me. I just don't think I'm a big sci-fi girl. So this is pretty ambitious to be on my TBR, but I probably will not read it. The reason I included it is because they're in the desert, which is kind of summery maybe. So if I'm ever gonna read it, maybe it's in the summer, but I don't have high hopes. I also want to get to The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I've also had this on my TBR for quite a while and obviously haven't picked it up, but this is, I think, a cozy little fantasy about a caseworker in the Department of Magical Youth. So it sounds like it's in kind of a modern world, but there's obviously magical elements to it. I'm thinking this wouldn't be a very hard story to get into, and obviously it takes place by the ocean, so hopefully putting it on my summer TBR means I actually will read it. Next, I have a few mystery thrillers that I would like to read this summer. The first thriller on my list is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham, and this is actually a funny story. I've had this on my want to read list for a really long time. Somehow I had heard really good things about it before it was even published, so I was always looking for it at my Barnes, but eventually realized it just wasn't even out yet. And I was in Charleston a few weeks ago, which is where the author lives, and they had it there, a signed edition actually, on their local authors table. So I was really excited and picked it up. But when I got home, my roommate Kat told me that our friend Mick, who also recently started a booktube, I'll put her in the description. You should totally go follow her. Mick recently read this book and she hated it. So we will see if I like this or not, but I've been waiting for it for so long that I'm just gonna read it. I also would love to finally start reading The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I have been putting this series off for a pretty dumb reason, and that is the third book is only out in hardcover right now. And I'm afraid of reading these two, loving them, and then waiting until the paperback comes out to finish the story. I just don't want to have two paperbacks and a hardcover, which is really a dumb issue to have. And I guess I don't have to buy the third one, but I don't know. I've just been waiting, and I think that the third one is actually coming out in paperback in July. So it's perfect timing. I finally can start reading these and then buy the paperback. So these are a YA mystery series about this girl, I think, who just randomly is put in this man's will. He's like super rich. She's never heard of him before. And I think he gives all of his money and like his estate to her. And so I would assume the family is really upset, and she's trying to figure out, why did this guy leave his whole fortune to me? And I've heard that it's a lot like Knives Out, and everyone loves this, so I'm so excited to finally dive into it. Last for this category is Good Girl, Bad Blood. This is the second book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series by Holly Jackson. And to be honest, I did not love the first one. I feel like the only person on earth who feels that way, but it just felt very young to me and a bit ridiculous. So I didn't go out and buy the second one right away. But one day I was at Books A Million and they had this on the bargain table for like $5. So I just picked it up. And I would like to probably reread the first one and then give this one a shot, because I've heard that it gets better. Even though people love the first one, this one I think is supposed to maybe be better, but I could be making that up. The first one is about this girl Pip who is in high school, and for her like capstone project or something, she decides to investigate this murder that happened in her town a few years ago. She thinks they have the wrong guy, and she decides to investigate herself. This one I think is about her starting a true crime podcast where she tries to solve murders, but I'm not entirely sure. Okay, we are finally getting to the end. We just have my romance TBR now. And this first one I think is maybe just general fiction, but I threw it in here. And it is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This was like the 2022 book of the year, I feel like, for Barnes & Noble, or maybe 2021. But this book was everywhere, and I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about it. I am just really late to the game and have been putting it off. I don't know if this is necessarily a very summery book. I think it deals with some heavy topics and is about like friendship and love, and it follows two main characters as they develop a video game, if I'm not mistaken. But I've just been wanting to read it for so long, and the cover is pretty like summery, so that's all I got. The rest are actual romances, and I have a couple series that I already talked about and want to finish. First is the Summer I Turned Pretty series. Like I said, I have the last two to finish. I've heard that these ones are not as good as the first one, but that's okay. I mean, they're just cute, and I would like to finish it, so these will definitely be read in the next couple months. And then I want to finish the Twisted series. I don't know if this will really happen because these are pretty long for romance books, but I haven't read a Twisted book in a while. For some reason, I just kind of like to sprinkle them in between other reads. And I feel like I should just go ahead and finish them. I have 2 Tessa Bailey books that I want to read this summer. My Killer Vacation and It Happened One Summer. Ooh, I hate how this one is bright white pages. That is the worst. Anyways, these are both romances and they both, I think, take place over the summer. This one definitely does. This one's on vacation, so it would make sense if it's over the summer. But I have had these on my bookshelf for a while and it's about time I get to them. I literally searched for My Killer Vacation for probably like 6 months and finally found it one day, and then have had it for at least another 6 months and I haven't read it. So again, there's a theme to this TBR and it is a lot of books that I've been putting off. So this is gonna force me to actually get to them. And lastly, I am embarrassed to admit that I have never read an Emily Henry book. I have owned 2 of her books for a pretty long time, so I finally need to read them. I have Book Lovers and People We Meet on Vacation. I know I do not have the new one, Happy Place, or Beach Read, which people say are her 2 best books. So I want to go into these ones first so that I can work my way from her like least favorite books to her favorite. I don't want to be going into Happy Place first and then be disappointed when I go back to these. So I'm not gonna let myself buy the other ones until I read these 2, and definitely People We Meet on Vacation I feel like I've got to read over the summer, right? Except I've heard this is the worst, but oh well. So there you have it. That is my very long summer TBR and my recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!